A simple pie seems harmless, golden crust, sweet filling. But for seniors, packaged pies can hide dangerous surprises. From excessive sugar and trans fats to recalls for mold or bacteria, these ready-made treats could spike blood pressure, strain kidneys, and interfere with medications. Today, we're revealing 9 packed pies to avoid at all costs, and 2 that are genuinely safe. Starting off with the number 9, we've got Hostess fruit pies. You open a box expecting a quick, nostalgic sugar hit and get hit back. Hostess fruit pies wear a friendly golden jacket, but the label tells a different story. Sugar high on the front, preservatives and processed oils on the back. One single Hostess snack-size fruit pie can carry 25 to 30 grams of sugar and a few hundred calories, the kind of quick snack that can push a fragile blood sugar balance over the edge for someone on diabetes meds. The ingredients list reads like a chemistry set: enriched flour, palm oil, glycerin, and preservatives such as sodium propionate and sodium benzoate tucked in with natural flavor. Those preservatives aren't illegal, but for older adults taking multiple prescriptions or watching sodium and sugar, they add up fast. Think about this. Nearly 9 out of 10 Americans aged 65 and older take at least one prescription medicine in a year, 88.6% by federal count. That matters because even simple additives and big doses of sugar can affect how drugs behave or make blood pressure and blood sugar harder to control. A once-a-day treat becomes a daily interaction risk if it's loaded with hidden sodium, added sugars, and processed fats. Inspection and safety history make this less comforting. Hostess has pulled products in the past over mold or quality issues, recalls that remind us how fragile the supply chain can be with high-volume snack makers. If you're giving one to an older relative because it's easy, you might be handing over a mini health trigger: sugar that spikes, additives that add sodium, and preservatives that linger. The pie's soft crust hides a few hundred milligrams of sodium and 20 to 30 grams of sugar. That's a real hit for someone on a sodium-restricted or carbohydrate-controlled plan. Picture an older neighbor who pops one of these with morning meds: one pie, plus their blood pressure pill, plus a snack of other processed foods during the day. Suddenly, their daily sodium or sugar intake has climbed to a level that interferes with tight medication control. It's not drama, it's arithmetic. One product designed for convenience can quietly climb into the danger for seniors zone. So when you see that neat little pie in the aisle, ask, is convenience worth a medication complication or a blood sugar wobble? Ever handed a harmless snack to a parent and regretted it later? Tell us what happened. That sweet crust is the bait. The nutrition label is the trap. Coming in at number 8, we have Little Debbie Swiss Roll and the packaging surprises. Little Debbie Swiss Rolls feel like childhood under glass. Soft cake, creamy ribbon, easy to eat. The problem isn't just the sugar, though a single roll packs a serious sweet punch. It's the production mistakes and mislabeling that have landed the brand in recall bulletins. In 2021, McKee Foods, maker of Little Debbie, issued an allergy alert after 25 cases of mini Nutty Buddy cookie bites were found to contain undeclared pecans, a tiny batch, but the kind of error that can cause a life-threatening allergic reaction in someone who's sensitive. That sort of mislabeled product shows how even trusted snack lines can have manufacturing slips that matter, especially for older adults with food allergies or weakened immune systems. Beyond allergen mix-ups, Swiss roll-style snacks are often treated with preservatives and stabilizers to keep that moist, soft texture on the shelf for months. That's great for store aisles, not always great for vulnerable consumers. The creamy center is usually high in added sugar and vegetable oils. Eat 2 and you might already be flirting with 1/3 of a typical senior's recommended daily added sugar limit. For seniors on certain antidepressants, blood pressure meds, or diabetes treatments, those sugar swings or extra sodium can interact unpredictably, and the person mixing the medication at home may never link a spike to a snack. If you want a concrete yardstick, many of these snack cakes list between 10 to 20 grams of added sugar per serving, and labels frequently bury the "contains" notices until you flip the package. There's also a legal trail. Swiss roll-style products from contract manufacturers have been pulled in past incidents when an ingredient came from a supplier later linked to contamination. In 2018, a nationwide recall tied to Swiss roll desserts happened because an ingredient supplier's whey powder might carry salmonella. That recall covered multiple brands across several states. That's a reminder that these products aren't isolated items. They're part of a chain where one bad ingredient can affect thousands of packages. For seniors, who may get sicker faster from a food-borne bug, that risk isn't theoretical. What to watch for in the store: mislabel warnings, may contain statements, and frequent changes to best buy dates. If manufacturers are posting allergy alerts or pulling lots, treat it as a red flag, not a corporate embarrassment to shrug off. The soft cake and creamy swirl are great for nostalgia. They're not worth the risk of an allergic reaction, an infection, or destabilized meds. Who else used to hide these in their lunchbox? If you still buy them, why? Soft spiral on the outside, a paperwork spiral on the inside if a supplier slips up. At number 7, Marie Callender's Frozen Mini Pies. Marie Callender's sells home style, and the packaging smells like a Sunday kitchen. But home style on a frozen label doesn't always equal low sodium, low sugar, or low processing. Take a look at the nutrition facts for a single frozen mini pie, and you'll see numbers that can add up. 300 to 700 calories per serving in some varieties, 15 to 25 grams total fat, and several hundred milligrams of sodium. In short, some of these pies are mini in size, not in impact. Older adults watching cholesterol, sodium, or total calories can be pushed into risky territory without realizing it. Beyond the numbers, recall history includes frozen entrees and packaged items from the broader company. A meat-based frozen item from the same brand has been pulled in recent years for contamination concerns, again underlining that frozen convenience items move through complex supply lines and sometimes require a recall. For seniors with compromised kidney function, that extra sodium and preservatives are not small details. High sodium intake raises blood pressure in a large share of older adults. In the US, hypertension affects roughly 70 to 84% of adults 65 and older depending on age and sex. That makes every extra 100 to 300 milligrams of sodium per small dessert matter. Here's the real grocery aisle trick. The buttery aroma and golden lattice make you think comfort. Meanwhile, the ingredient list will often include fractionated palm oil, emulsifiers, stabilizers, and natural flavors, all used to lock texture and shelf life into place. Over weeks of weekly convenience purchases, that texture-locking chemistry becomes daily intake. The slow creep that shows up later as higher cholesterol, a tougher-to-control blood pressure reading, or a medication side effect that requires a dose adjustment. Imagine a home-style pie that quietly adds 10 to 20% of someone's daily saturated fat in a single bite. That's not nostalgia, it's a hidden load. Do you save frozen pies for company or sneak them for midnight snacks? Be honest. What's your favorite flavor? If the label says home-style, but the nutrition panel screams processed, treat it like a bait-and-switch. Coming in at number 6, Pillsbury Toaster Strudel Pies. Pillsbury Toaster Strudel promises a hot, gooey pastry with a forgiving prep time. Pop it in the toaster, spread the icing, eat. It's a convenience edge many older shoppers like, but convenience comes at a cost. 2 pastries, a common serving, can contain about 340 to 350 calories and nearly 18 to 19 grams of sugar, including 17 to 18 grams of added sugar in some varieties. That's a heavy sugar load for a morning meal. And for someone taking diabetes meds, it's a real swing. If you're dosing insulin or using a medication that needs a steady carb load, a surprise sugar surge can be dangerous. Toaster strudels also contain natural and artificial flavorings and sometimes bioengineered ingredients, which may not matter for everyone, but do matter for people who are sensitive to additives or who have several doctors managing complex prescriptions. Throw in sodium, around 300 milligrams per serving, refined flour, and fat designed for shelf stability, and that easy breakfast becomes a not-so-easy chemical mix for seniors who need steady vitals. The label hides the truth with a charming product photo and a promise of fresh-baked flavor. The reality? A quick shot of added sugar and refined carbs followed by a mid-morning slump that can push someone to reach for another processed snack. Pillsbury has its own recall history with high-volume products. The brand's recalls for flour and ready-to-bake items over the years show how large bakeries are vulnerable to supplier issues like salmonella or labeling errors. That's less about the pastry and more about supply chain fragility. A single contaminated ingredient can send out millions of packages before anyone notices. For older adults, a foodborne illness can escalate faster and land someone in the hospital. So the convenience of toaster strudel, that 2-minute warm-up, comes with risks beyond sugar and sodium. This one needs a user note. If a senior's breakfast routinely contains toaster pastries, compare that against what their medications and blood pressure targets ask for. Are you trading a fast meal for more doctor visits? Would you trust a toaster pastry as a healthy breakfast? If yes, say which one. We might roast it next. Want to avoid surprises on the label? Hit subscribe now. We'll show safer swaps and exact brands that actually list everything truthfully. 2 toasters, 1 icing packet, and a sugar swing big enough to rattle a glucose monitor. At number 5, we have Entenmann's Mini Fruit Pies. You think mini means light. It doesn't. Entenmann's apple or mixed fruit minis wear a tiny coat of flaky crust, but the label shows a sugar hit most seniors can't afford. One common listing for a single mini pie reports roughly 15 to 30 grams of total sugar and 200 to 300 calories per pie, with sodium in the 200 to 300 milligrams range, numbers that add up fast if someone grabs two or keeps one for a mid-afternoon nibble. That's not just a snack. That's a measurable shift in daily carbs and sodium that can nudge a blood pressure reading or a glucose meter. There's a second problem. High-volume bakers move fast and depend on long supply chains. In 2019, Bimbo Bakeries, which owns several brands, issued a voluntary recall after customers reported visible foreign plastic in some packages. It's the kind of defect that makes a product more than unappetizing. It becomes unsafe. Large-scale recalls aren't rare. They show how one supplier slip or a machine failure can put thousands of retail items at risk. For older adults, food safety stumbles matter more because infections hit them harder and recovery is slower. Think about the routine. An older person takes 3 or more prescription medicines. That's common. Nearly 68% of adults, 65 plus, reported taking 3 or more drugs in recent data, and then reaches for an easy pastry at breakfast or after a pill. The sugar and sodium from a mini pie can interact with blood pressure meds, cause glucose swings for people on insulin or sulfonylureas, and push daily sodium totals higher, forcing dose adjustments or extra clinic visits. Those are real consequences, not theory. Texture and scent do their job. A warm mini pie smells like a small victory, especially when mobility or cooking is a challenge. That's the sales angle, convenience. But ingredient lists will often include palm oil, corn syrup, stabilizers, and preservatives to keep the product shelf-stable. Over weeks and months, those additives move from occasional treat to repeated intake. Exactly the slow creep that changes lab numbers and blood pressure charts. If a caregiver or a grandkid buys them for convenience, check the label. Each pie can equal 1/3 or more of a recommended single meal added sugar allotment for a person with diabetes. Quick store tip: pick a single serving product, flip it, and read the added sugar line and sodium. If the sugar is 15 grams plus and sodium is 200 milligrams plus, you're in the risk zone for repeated intake. For anyone on blood pressure pills or diabetes meds, that's a signal to swap to a fresh fruit, a single-ingredient yogurt with no added sugar, or a whole grain toast with a thin smear of nut butter. Have you ever found a surprise in a packaged snack? Tell us what it was, and did you still eat it? Mini pie? Major impact? Don't let a bite become a clinic visit. At number 5, Mrs. Smith's individual pies. Mrs. Smith's is nostalgia in a box: apple, cherry, coconut cream. The photo on the shelf says home style. The aroma promises comfort, and the size looks right for one person. But the nutrition panel pulls the curtain back. Many of these individual frozen pies list 300 to 420 calories per slice, 15 to 26 grams of total fat, and sodium in the 300 to 350 milligrams range. Saturated fat often makes up a significant portion of that total fat number. For a senior limiting saturated fat and sodium because of heart disease or kidney concerns, a single slice can take a large bite out of daily targets. Labels don't lie. Home style can still mean shelf stable. Look at the ingredients and you'll find enriched wheat flour, palm or vegetable oils, corn syrup, stabilizers, and natural flavors. Those terms help the product survive transport and long display times, but they don't help fragile hearts or kidneys. With hypertension affecting more than 70% of adults over 60, every 100 to 300 milligrams of added sodium per dessert is not small. It's something your pharmacist will ask about at the next refill. There are supply chain stories here too. Frozen lines rely on bulky throughput and shared processing lines. When a company issues a recall or an allergy alert for one frozen dessert, other products can get swept in while they investigate. That's important to remember. A recall on a related product doesn't always mean every flavor or SKU is unsafe, but it does mean quality control needs checking. For older adults, the consequence of eating a contaminated frozen pie is more severe than for a young adult: dehydration, hospitalization, or a cascade of complications. That risk makes convenience a choice with real stakes. Imagine sitting down with a slice that looks like comfort but has more than half your allowed saturated fat for one meal. For someone on a statin or a sodium-restricted diet, that one slice can flip lab tests and force a doctor to recheck numbers. Practical move: if you like a nostalgic pie, serve a very small portion, a quarter slice. Pair it with plain Greek yogurt and fresh berries to dilute the sugar, or make a real fruit crisp at home with oats and a teaspoon of butter. If baking is impossible, check the label for added sugars and sodium and treat anything over 200 to 300 milligrams sodium or 15 grams added sugar as a red flag. Which classic pie would you keep if you could only eat one slice a year? Defend your choice. A photo of comfort can hide a nutrition hit. Don't let packaging win. Transitioning to number 3, we have Sara Lee frozen dessert pies. Sara Lee markets convenience and dessert heritage. Open the box and the product looks like a bakery item, but the nutrition details can be a different story. Per serving calories often run from 300 to 420. Total sugars frequently top 30 grams in some dessert pies. And added sugars can reach levels that make a single serving nearly 2/3 of a recommended limit for someone with diabetes. Those are not abstract numbers. They affect blood glucose charts and medication timing. Allergy and contamination history adds another layer. In May 2021, Sara Lee Frozen Bakery conducted a recall for certain pecan pies after a supplier's raw pecan handling raised concern about cross-contact with peanuts, an allergy risk that forced product pulls from stores. That recall shows how an ingredient common on many pies can create a sudden safety problem. For older adults with food allergies or with weakened immune systems, the risk of even trace contamination can be dangerous. Here's the physiology angle. Seniors often take multiple meds, statins, ACE inhibitors, anticoagulants, diabetes drugs, and those medications are sensitive to sudden nutritional changes. A dessert that supplies 20 to 30 grams of added sugar can blunt the effect of a morning insulin dose or cause a blood sugar spike that leads to extra insulin use and then a late dip. That roller coaster is exactly what clinicians warn about when patients combine processed sweets with complex medication regimens. The result? More glucose checks, more calls to the doctor, more stress. But it's not just sugar. Sara Lee pies can include preservatives and stabilizers designed to preserve texture and shelf life. Over weeks, repeated exposure to those additives adds to daily sodium and saturated fat intake. If a person eats these packaged desserts weekly, the cumulative effect shows up on cholesterol panels and blood pressure logs. Practical angle. If you want the bakery look without the invisible load, buy a fresh small pie from a local bakery that uses fruit and butter, or make a half-size fruit tart with whole grain crust and half the sugar. If that's not possible, check the product label for added sugars. And consider this rule. If a single serving has 20 grams or more added sugar, cut the serving in half and pair it with protein. Have you ever had a grocery recall hit your pantry? What did you toss out? A boxed pie can look like a celebration and act like a lab test you didn't sign up for. Arriving at number 2, Tastycake fruit pies. Tastycake fruit pies promise a flaky crust and a bright filling. The shelf presence is strong. They sit ready in convenience aisles, designed for impulse buys. But a single packaged pie can carry 350 to 480 calories depending on variety, with sugar levels that push into the high end. Some product listings show nearly 30 grams or more per serving. That's a hard data point for anyone counting carbs or watching daily sugar limits. Safety history matters here too. In late 2021 and again in subsequent years, Flowers Foods, parent company for several brands, issued recalls and allergy alerts tied to products that might contain metal fragments or undeclared soy. In October 2021, a recall covered cupcakes and other items after a vendor warned of possible metal mesh fragments in an ingredient. In 2022, Flowers Foods recalled certain glazed pies for undeclared soy. Those incidents show two things. 1. A supplier issue can ripple through many SKUs. And 2. The risk isn't always obvious from the outside of the package. For seniors with allergies, a single eaten pie could trigger a dangerous reaction. For vulnerable immune systems, contamination issues can land someone in urgent care. Nutritionally, these pies also often include vegetable shortening, high fructose corn syrup, and stabilizers to keep the filling soft in packaging. On a weekly basis, a regular intake of that mix raises triglycerides and can push someone over recommended sugar limits. Pair that with the fact that around 88 to 89% of older adults use at least one prescription medicine in a 12-month period, and you see the real-world clash. Packaged sweets plus complex drug regimens equals more monitoring and potential adjustments. Practical advice. If you find a Tastycake pie in a cart, note the label. If the product has an allergy alert or recent recall history, pass. Otherwise, aim to share the pie and have a low-sugar cup of tea at the same time, or choose a fresh fruit option. For shoppers buying for seniors, remember that convenience is only worth the cost if the label matches the person's dietary needs. Quick poll, grab a pie or grab an apple? You know which one will roast in the next video. Vote below. Flaky crust, fast regret. Don't let a convenience aisle impulse become an avoidable trip to the clinic. Finally, at number 1, we have Hostess apple pies. You want to wrap what looks like a harmless golden little pocket and expect a quick comfort hit. Instead, you get a sugar and sodium package that's been engineered to survive shipping, shelves, and a few careless carts. Hostess snack-size fruit pies list nutrition that reads loud and clear. Single-serve fruit pastries can push 25 to 30 grams of total sugar and 300 to 450 calories per pie, depending on the size and flavor. Numbers that matter for anyone counting carbs or watching blood pressure. One serving from the Hostess product pages shows calories in the high hundreds per multi-pastry serving and added sugars in the high 20-gram range. Why that's a senior problem? Nearly 9 out of 10 U.S. adults age 65 and older take at least one prescription medicine in a year, about 88.6%. And more than 70% of older adults have measured high blood pressure or take blood pressure drugs. Those two facts together mean a high-sugar, high-sodium snack isn't just dessert. It's a variable that can force extra glucose checks, change how a drug behaves, or nudge blood pressure upward. The arithmetic is simple. If a single pie supplies 200 to 300 milligrams of sodium and 20 to 30 grams of sugar, repeated or daily intake quickly adds up against strict medication plans. There's another angle: recalls and quality incidents. Hostess has publicly posted voluntary recalls, for example, limited lots pulled for mold, and has had quality alerts tied to supplier ingredients in recent years. Major snack makers operate at huge scale. A mechanical fault on one line or a contaminated ingredient can affect thousands or millions of packages before the problem is noticed. For older adults, a foodborne bug or mold exposure can cause disproportionate harm. Longer hospital stays, worse dehydration, even life-threatening complications. That's not speculation. It's how infections behave in vulnerable populations. Look at the label and you'll see why convenience often wins the aisle. Enriched flour, palm oil, high levels of added sugar, and preservatives such as sodium propionate or sodium benzoate. Those preservatives keep the texture fresh in the box, but they also add sodium and increase the chemical load a person takes in every day. If a caregiver gives one of these with morning medications, the combined effect can be a swinging blood glucose curve or a small sodium nudge that accumulates over the week. Imagine a jar of sugar opened every morning at breakfast. Because that little pie isn't a bite, it's a serving-sized sugar event. Practical moves for shoppers. Treat Hostess snack pies as occasional treats only, not everyday convenience. If you must buy them, check the added sugars line and cut the portion in half. Better, swap for a fresh apple with a teaspoon of nut butter or a single-ingredient yogurt. Similar comfort with a fraction of the sugar and no preservative burden. Ever handed a cute snack to an older family member and later wished you hadn't? Share the story. We read them and learned from them. Looks like nostalgia, acts like a lab experiment. Read the label before you hand one over. Now, coming to the safe options, at first we have Kashi. If you want something quick that won't blow up a blood sugar meter or pile on hidden preservatives, look for small, single-ingredient or clearly labeled organic bars, the kind Kashi makes with fruit purees and minimal added sugar. Kashi's organic layered fruit bars and similar products advertise real fruit purees, organic certification, no high-fructose corn syrup, and no artificial colors. Labels that matter when seniors are taking multiple meds and watching sodium and sugar. Product pages and smart label listings show low sugar counts. For some Kashi fruit bars, 10 to 15 grams sugar per small bar, as low as 50 to 60 calories per bar. For certain varieties, 0 sodium on some varieties, and short ingredient lists focused on fruit. That design makes them a practical swap for a convenience pie. Why this helps older adults. Lower added sugar, low or 0 sodium, and organic ingredients reduce the chances of unexpected interactions with medications and cut down the daily chemical load. If a senior needs a sweetness fix after a morning pill, one of these small bars supplies a measured amount of carbohydrate that's easier to plan for in medication timing. From a purely numeric view, trading a 20 to 30 gram added sugar pie for a 10 to 15 gram fruit bar cuts sugar intake in half for that snack moment, and that halves the chance of a surprise glucose spike from that single item. There's also the transparency factor. Kashi product pages and smart label entries list ingredients cleanly. Fruit purees, fruit juice concentrates, and whole food components rather than long chemical names. That helps both caregivers and pharmacists spot potential conflicts faster. Avoiding ingredients like high fructose corn syrup or unnamed natural flavors reduces the odds of hidden sodium or sneaky stabilizers. In many Kashi fruit bar listings, the package specifically states no refined sugars or no artificial colors. That's not a guarantee of perfect health, but it's a meaningful difference versus a multi-ingredient processed pie. Practical tip: if shopping for a senior, compare sugars per serving and sodium. If an item lists under 5 milligrams sodium and under 15 grams total sugar for a snack-size portion, it's a much safer convenience pick than a boxed pastry listing 200 to 300 milligrams sodium and 20 to 30 grams added sugar. Kashi-style organic fruit bars often fit that safer profile. Would you switch from a pie to a tiny fruit bar if it meant fewer glucose checks? Vote pie or bar. Same sweet satisfaction. A lot less paperwork on the glucose chart. Next safe option is Amy's Organic. Amy's is a brand built on organic ingredients and clear labeling. Whether you want a small savory pot pie or a seasonal sweet, Amy's product lines emphasize certified organic components, no genetically engineered ingredients, and minimal preservatives, traits that make them a stronger choice for seniors who need clean labels and predictable nutrition. Amy's published ingredient lists show organic whole wheat flour, organic fruit or vegetables, butter, and straightforward items rather than long lists of stabilizers and artificial flavors. The brand's pages and third-party food score listings note organic certification and the absence of synthetic pesticides and many additives. Why that matters practically? Organic certification limits exposure to certain synthetic pesticides and many synthetic additives. For older adults on multiple medications, fewer unknown or unnamed natural flavors and stabilizers lowers the chance that a rarely used ingredient will interact badly with a drug. Amy's also tends to list allergens clearly: milk, wheat, soy, which helps caregivers avoid dangerous cross-contact. Product labels for Amy's pot pies and similar frozen items show ingredient transparency and emphasize non-GMO and organic sourcing. A different approach from large snack makers whose primary goal is ultra-long shelf life. Nutrition reality check. Organic does not automatically mean low sugar or low sodium, so read the label. But Amy's options frequently come closer to a real food profile than a sandwich-style pastry full of corn syrups and industrial fats. For example, Amy's vegetable pot pie lists organic vegetables and butter on the front. The result is a product that, while still a processed frozen entree, relies on familiar kitchen ingredients. That helps caregivers portion and plan around medication schedules more reliably. If you compare an Amy's-style small pie to a Hostess or Tastycake item, you'll often see lower added sugars and fewer mysterious preservatives. Practical shopping tips. Pick Amy's labeled organic items. Check sodium and added sugar lines. And choose smaller portions. Pair a small Amy's pie with a fresh salad or plain yogurt to keep a meal balanced. If refrigeration or prep is a problem, select ready-to-eat fresh fruit or a single-ingredient nut pack as an alternative. But when convenience must win, an Amy's Organic small pie is a reasonable compromise compared with high-sugar boxed pastries. Have you tried an Amy's frozen pie? Which one surprised you the most, good or bad? When convenience meets clear ingredients, you get a treat you can actually schedule around meds, not another variable on the glucose chart. Not all packed pies are created equal. Some can quietly harm your health. Subscribe now, and I'll show you which brands are truly safe, fresh, and worth eating every week.